Welcome to this journey through one of the most unsettling cases recorded in Savannah, Georgia's history. Before we start, I invite you to leave a comment about where you're watching from and the exact time you're hearing this story. We're curious to know the places and moments when these true accounts reach people. In 1846, Savannah's cotton plantations spread along the Ogeechee River, like white marks across the Georgia land. The Witmore estate covered almost 3,000 acres of rich soil, where Spanish moss draped from old oaks like funeral veils. It was here, in the servants' quarters behind the main house, that something started which would question everything the community thought about human nature. Plantation records found in 1868 during the tearing down of the old overseer's cabin included entries that made no sense. Mixed among lists of animals and crop amounts, someone had written neatly about meals that satisfied in ways no normal food could. The writing belonged to Marcus Witmore, the youngest son of the plantation owner, though he denied it until he died in 1892. Aurelia Thompson came to the Witmore estate in late spring of 1846. The bill of sale kept in Chatham County records showed her age as 22, with a note about her great skill in cooking. What the paper did not say was the strange reasons for her past jobs. 3 different families in Charleston had let her go within 18 months, each saying only that her cooking had become unfit for their households. Mrs. Elanina Witmore, the lady of the plantation, had been suffering from deep sadness after losing her baby daughter the winter before. She seldom left her rooms and ate almost nothing beyond thin soup and plain biscuits. The kitchen workers, led by an old woman named Bessie, could not make anything to interest Mrs. Witmore's small appetite. Aurelia's cabin stood in the row farthest from the main house, near the swamp edge, where the land met wild, unused ground. Neighbors later remembered smoke rising from her chimney at odd times, sometimes deep in the night when cooking fires should have been out long ago. The smoke carried a smell that was both tempting and somehow wrong, though no one could explain exactly why it felt disturbing. Within days of Aurelia's arrival, Mrs. Witmore started eating regular meals again. She asked only for food made by the new cook, saying it had healing powers unlike anything she had tasted before. The meat was always well seasoned and very tender, but its true source stayed unclear. When asked, Aurelia said only that it came from wild animals she caught in the swamp during her free time. The other houseworkers noticed changes in Mrs. Witmore that went beyond her new hunger. She grew very protective of Aurelia's cooking, not allowing any other family member to try the special dishes. She would lock herself in the dining room for these private meals, and the servants heard her humming happily as she ate, a sound she had not made since before her child's death. Marcus Witmore, then 19 years old, became deeply curious about the mysterious cook. His private journal, found years later, hidden behind loose boards in his bedroom wall, contained careful notes about Aurelia's nighttime actions. He wrote of following her into the swamp on nights without moonlight, seeing her vanish into places where even skilled hunters were afraid to go. She would come back before sunrise, carrying cloth packages that left dark wet marks on the sandy path. The plantation's animals started acting strangely during this time. Cattle refused to eat in certain fields, especially those close to Aurelia's cabin. Horses grew nervous when taken past her quarters, and several important breeding pigs were found dead with no clear reason, their bodies showing odd marks that the local animal doctor could not explain. Bessie, the head cook, tried to learn the source of Aurelia's ingredients by searching her cabin while she was gone. She found pieces of meat hanging in the rafters at different stages of drying, but the flesh was unlike anything she had seen in 40 years of kitchen work. The texture was too smooth for pork, too light for beef, and had a marbled look that made her uneasy in a way she could not name. Other workers on the plantation began having troubling dreams after the new cook arrived. They told of dreams where they walked through dark kitchens with shadowy figures making fancy meals, and the smell of cooking meat stayed in their noses long after they woke. Several asked to move to other properties, saying they could no longer sleep well while living on the estate. The local doctor, Dr. Samuel Hartwell, was called to check Mrs. Witmore when her husband grew worried about her big change. She had put on weight quickly and showed almost wild energy instead of her earlier sadness. In his notes, he mentioned a strange smell on her clothes and breath, something like iron mixed with another thing he chose not to name. Nearby plantations saw more runaway slaves during this period, though none could be linked to any certain place. Descriptions from people who saw fleeing figures in the swamp were mixed and often did not match. Some spoke of seeing hurt or upset people stumbling through the marsh just before dawn, but searches by local officials found no signs of them. Marcus Witmore's interest in Aurelia grew stronger as summer turned to fall. His journal notes became more wild, full of guesses about her real nature and the source of her cooking skill. He wrote of facing her directly several times, asking what she was giving his mother, but said she would only smile and speak in puzzling words about food that filled deeper needs than regular meals could. The truth started to come out in October when a traveling merchant named Jonathan Reeves stopped at the plantation for a night's rest. He was given a guest cabin with a good view of the kitchen gardens and servants' area. Unable to sleep because of the heat and bugs, he saw Aurelia come out of the swamp in the early hours before dawn, pulling something heavy wrapped in canvas. Reeves later told authorities that curiosity made him check after Aurelia went back to her cabin. Following the drag marks in the sand, he found a spot near the property edge where the ground had been dug up and quickly covered again. His first digging showed pieces that made him stop right away and leave the plantation before sunrise, skipping the stay he had been given. The merchant's report to the county sheriff led to an official look into the Witmore estate. Deputies came on a foggy November morning when mist from the river hid much of the land. They brought Dr. Hartwell and Reverend Timothy Morrison from Savannah's First Presbyterian Church, both agreeing to see whatever might be found. Aurelia was asked many questions about her cooking ways and where her ingredients came from. She kept saying everything she made came from honest sources, either bought from local farmers or caught by her own hunting in the wild areas around. When pushed about the special quality of the meat, she said she had family recipes passed down over years, methods for cooking and seasoning that made ordinary game taste better. The search of her cabin showed a set of iron pots and tools that were very clean despite their great age, hidden under loose floorboards. They also found a leather journal written in English mixed with what looked like an African language. Most upsetting were careful drawings with the words, pictures of preparation steps that seemed to focus on things other than normal animals or wild game. Mrs. Witmore was asked about her recent eating habits and her sudden health improvement. She got very upset when asked to describe the meals from Aurelia, saying only that she had been given well-made meat dishes that brought back her hunger after her time of sadness. She could not or would not say what kind of meat it was, saying only that it had amazing food value. Digging at the disturbed spot near the swamp found proof that greatly worried the search team. Buried in the sandy ground were pieces that pointed to actions not normal for food making. One bits showed signs of careful cutting, but their size and type raised questions no one there wanted to say out loud. Dr. Hartwell's look at the finds made him ask for help from doctors at the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta. The pieces were sent there under close watch for better study. The report sent back to county officials but never shared publicly had results that questioned normal ideas about the case. More checks showed gaps in Aurelia's past work history that had not been noticed at first. Records from Charleston showed she had worked for different families over years, but people who could have given clear stories about her time there had either moved or could not be found. The case changed when 3 people from nearby places came forward with details about strange things they had seen over the past months. Each told of seeing lone figures walking toward the Witmore estate in late evening, people who seemed to answer some kind of call or offer. None of these people were seen coming back the same way. Marcus Witmore's journal gave the most shocking views into what Aurelia was really doing. His last notes, written in more and more shaky writing, described following her to the deepest swamp parts, where she kept what he called a second kitchen. This rough outdoor spot had tools and supplies that suggested food making on a much larger scale than one family needed. The young man's story included details about how Aurelia chose and got her ingredients. According to what he saw, she would go to Savannah's poorer areas on market days, talking with people who looked desperate or in need. She offered them work or short-term shelter, deals that always meant he went with her to far-off spots. When faced with Marcus Witmore's claims, Aurelia said she was innocent, but her actions seemed more suspicious to the officials asking questions. She said the young man's story came from too much imagination and an unhealthy interest in her. Yet her reasons for the proof found on the property grew less clear as the questions went on. The investigation reached its peak when officials decided on a full search of the swamp areas where Aurelia said she hunted wild game. Local hunters who knew the land well were brought in to lead the group through the dangerous marsh. What they found in a clearing about 2 miles from the main house went beyond anything expected and broke all ideas of right and wrong. The place had the remains of a well-made setup meant for things far past normal cooking. Carefully built smokehouses and drying racks showed activities that had gone on for a long time. Most upsetting were personal items spread around the area, things that showed several people had been there, with their final fate unknown. Proof pointed to Aurelia doing her work with the knowledge and maybe help of other house staff. Several servants were held for questioning, though most said they knew nothing wrong. The investigation showed a web of silence and looking away that let the situation go on unseen for months. Mrs. Witmore's health fell fast once her special meals stopped. She had what Dr. Hartwell called strong withdrawal signs, including bad shaking, seeing things that were not there, and a constant need for the exact kind of food she had gotten used to. Her husband had to hold her back to stop her from finding Aurelia's leftover supply of prepared food. The court case that came after was done with unusual quiet because of the sensitive proof. Aurelia faced several charges, though the exact ones were never told publicly. The trial moved to Augusta to avoid strong local attention and possible trouble in Savannah. In court, Aurelia's lawyer tried to say she was caught by things beyond her control, a woman held by old ways and practices from her family. He said she felt forced to keep doing things she knew were wrong because of cultural and spiritual duties. The other side showed proof that described planned harmful actions, meant to feed both her own mind needs and the twisted desires she had built in her employers. They said her actions showed planned cruelty and no care for human life or worth. Witnesses spoke about the changes seen in Mrs. Witmore's actions and looks while Aurelia worked there. Several said she became almost a different person, showing a strong love for her special meals that came close to fixation. The bond between cook and lady had grown into something beyond normal housework. Marcus Witmore's words in court gave the strongest proof against Aurelia. His full account of her night actions and the planned way she found and approached possible victims showed clear planning that shocked even those used to court cases. His journal parts were read out loud, filling the room with fear. The defense tried to weaken Marcus's words by questioning his mind health and saying his strong interest in Aurelia led him to make up or add to what he saw. They noted he waited months before telling authorities, saying a really worried person would have acted sooner. Medical proof about the physical finds and the plantation was especially hard for the jury. Dr. Hartwell and other doctors described their results in plain medical words, but what they meant was clear and terrible. The size and planned way of the work suggested actions far beyond single events. Several people came forward to talk about missing persons in the Savannah area during Aurelia's time there. While no direct link could be made between those missing and the plantation work, the timing and details made a pattern the court side said was too clear to ignore. The trial showed new facts about Aurelia's past that had stayed hidden. She was born on a South Carolina plantation where similar strange events happened in her early years. Witnesses said food-making and eating practices that crossed normal moral lines had existed in her family for generations. Defense lawyers tried to say Aurelia was just following traditions she was taught were okay in her background. They claimed she did not grasp the moral and legal meaning of her actions, having grown up where such things were seen as normal and even pushed. The other side answered by showing proof of Aurelia's smart mind and careful ways, saying she fully knew what she was doing and hid it on purpose because she knew it was wrong. They pointed to her clever tricks and the careful way she avoided being caught for months as clear signs of her guilt. Mrs. Witmore was called to speak about her time eating the meals from Aurelia. Her words came slowly and often made little sense as she tried to describe feelings and experiences hard to put into normal words. She admitted to a powerful craving for the special food that went beyond any hunger she had felt before. This trial ended after 3 weeks of stories that left everyone involved and watching deeply shaken. The jury talked for less than 2 hours before deciding guilty on every charge. The judge gave Aurelia the death sentence, pointing to the especially awful nature of her crimes and the danger she posed to proper society. Appeals made for Aurelia said the proof against her was mostly indirect and that the other side had not shown guilt without doubt. They said the quick decision came more from fear and bias than from the facts given in court. The appeals failed, and Aurelia's execution was set for March 1847. But she died in her cell 2 weeks before that date, apparently from natural causes, though some officials quietly doubted the real reason for her death. The Witmore family left their plantation after the trial ended. Mrs. Witmore needed long medical care for what doctors called a kind of addiction they had never seen before. She never fully got better from what happened and died in 1851 in a private care home near Charleston. Marcus Witmore left Georgia for good after giving his court words. He went to California during the gold rush and was never known to talk about his family plantation experiences. His journal stayed hidden in his old bedroom until the house was torn down in 1898, when building workers found it by chance. The plantation house stood empty for years after the family left. Local people reported odd things on the property, like smoke rising from the empty kitchen and sounds of cooking at night. These stories were usually seen as coming from too much imagination, fed by knowledge of what had happened. In 1851, a railroad company bought the land to Bowie, LD, a new rail line from Savannah to Augusta. But work stopped after workers found troubling things buried across the property. The public reason for stopping was bad soil, but private letters suggested other reasons affected the choice. The case drew notice from writers and newspeople across the South, though most stories focused on shocking parts rather than true facts. Several books came out claiming to tell the real story, but they had many wrong details and made up parts that hid the actual events. School interest in the case started in the 1860s, when University of Georgia researchers looked at what they called unusual social actions in far-off communities. But their work was never shared, and the study materials vanished from university files in 1868 during library building changes. The old plantation site slowly went back to wild land as the swamp took over areas once cleared for crops. By 1870, few signs remained of the buildings or farming that had once been there. Local hunters stayed away from the area, saying animals would not go into that region. In 1882, some archaeology students from Emory University tried to find and dig sites linked to the case. They stopped their work after early digging gave results their teacher called not fitting accepted history stories. The students reportedly had to sign papers not to talk about what they found. The few people still alive who saw the original events kept quiet as they grew old. Marcus Witmore died in San Francisco in 1892. Without ever speaking publicly about his experiences beyond his court words. His wife said he had repeating bad dreams until he died, always with sounds and smells of cooking. Dr. Hartwell's medical notes from the case stayed locked in the Chatham County Courthouse until 1934, when they went to the Georgia Historical Society with rules against public view. Researchers allowed limited looks described the papers as very upsetting and questioning normal views of the case. Modern checks of the area have been hard because of land changes from building work and nature shifts. Still, from time to time, construction teams and utility workers find signs that proof of past actions may still lie buried in the region. The mind effects of the case went far beyond those directly part of it. Several other homes in the Savannah area reported similar issues with houseworkers in the years after, though none went as far as what happened at the Witmore plantation. These events created a feeling of doubt and fear that lasted for decades. Local stories grew around the events, making tales and legends that looked little like the real facts. These often focused on ghostly parts and punishment from above, showing how the community needed to handle painful events through known story forms. The true facts stay too upsetting for easy talk in normal society. Church papers from the time show several ministers refused burial services for people connected to the case, saying worries about spiritual meaning of their part. Reverend Morrison, who saw the first investigation, moved to Virginia in 1848 and never came back to Georgia. The case affected legal rules, with later court cases mentioning the proof-gathering ways and witness rules created during Aurelia's case. But the exact details were never named directly, with court papers referring only to the Savannah example without more explanation. Property records show the land changed owners many times in the following years, with each new owner leaving plans after short stays. A pattern appeared of strange problems that always stopped successful use of the site for any useful purpose. In 1896, the last living member of the original search team, Deputy Sheriff William Crawford, gave a deathbed statement to his minister. According to the pastor's private notes, Crawford said proof had been hidden on purpose during the first investigation because officials feared how people would react to full truth. The minister's account, found in church files in 1943, suggested the real size of Aurelia's actions went beyond even the upsetting details shown in court. Crawford reportedly described other places across the region where similar proof was found but never officially told. As the 1800s ended, attempts to record the case grew harder because witnesses died and sensitive papers were destroyed on purpose. Officials who took part in the investigation carried their full knowledge to their graves, leaving only broken pieces for later researchers. The effect on the local community lasted long and deeply. Families who had lived in the area for generations moved to other places, unable to fit their ideas of human nature with what had been shown. The community's social ties never fully healed from the discoveries of what happened near them. Modern mind studies of the remaining proof suggest patterns like what today's experts call planned harmful actions, mixed with careful control of people in weak positions. But the time and cultural setting make final answers impossible. The site stays mostly untouched today, part of a nature preserve that draws few visitors, despite being close to Savannah's tourist spots. Park workers say animal numbers in the area stay low, and camping is not encouraged because of what officials call nature reasons. Occasional tries by history experts and news writers to look into the case bring little new information because of time past and hidden records. The few papers left raise more questions than answers, making a history mystery that may never be fully solved. In the end, the case of Aurelia Thompson remains a warning that human actions can fall to levels that question our basic ideas about society and right behavior. The events at Witmore plantation showed that even inside settled social systems, harmful people can work unseen for long periods when their actions are well hidden. The quiet that came after the trial showed not just time passing, but a group's wish to forget events too upsetting for easy memory. Some truths, it seems, were too terrible for a community to accept while going on as normal. Today, more than a century and a half later, the Spanish moss still hangs from the oaks along the Ogeechee River, and the morning mist still rises from the swamp where Aurelia once did her night work. But the land remembers what happened there, and perhaps some silences are meant to last forever. The case files stay sealed. The witnesses are long gone, and the complete truth may never be known. But for those who study the darker parts of human history, the events of 1846 stand as a frightening reminder that evil can take any form, and the most dangerous hunters are often those who seem most kind and helpful. The story ends not with a clear answer, but with the knowledge that some parts of human life are too dark to light fully, and perhaps that is how it should be.